Things are going to start happening to me now.
You've done all the reading. You're a scholar, you're a professor. You've done all the reading. You've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
More or less, eat shit and die.
You wouldn't know a fact if it begged you all night long.
Want to give the wrong impression, because I am very high.
Ran up behind him with a hatchet. Smash, smash, smash.
Yeah. Care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you.
It's another Friday. Felony Friday? That's John Odermatt stuff. We've got Garbage Man, we've got Tyler, Libertarian Podcast Review. This is going to be a special one, and we're going to break some things down. We're going to go over the Respondent.
By Greg Ellis.
Yeah, the Respondent, a true story, exposing the cartel of family law. I'm part of that cartel. Anyway, welcome everybody. We're going to do a little bit different things here. First of all, Andy, let everybody know what you've been up to, what shows you've been on. I understand you were on Timcast and you talked a lot about Crowder. How'd that go?
Yeah, follow me at louderwithcrowder.com. Join my mug club. I haven't been doing shit, really, just being a dad, hanging at the house. My daughter's really thriving. She's gained a little weight since we moved back, and she's reading every night. And I just got her a Tuttle Twins book that she's excited. We got through a little bit of it last night and she fell asleep, but yeah, I hadn't been doing too much, just being dad and kind of getting my ducks in a row up here. Hadn't started working yet, but I got a few things I got to do first. I got to transfer my CDL and jump through those extra hoops to do that, but I'm on my way.
We've got our boy Travis Tyree here in the building. Sup, BBs?
Shout out to Travis. He got me this book.
Yeah. So Travis, I didn't talk to you. I mean, if maybe you need to come join us. I don't know. So feel free if you want to. Let me know. At least DM me or something. We would have your input as well. So kind of the prospect and the premise of this book. Travis got it for you, obviously, because he hates women. What else do we need to say about? No. What was the reasoning for you getting the book? And then I pushed my way in. I'm like, I got to have me some of this. So why did this happen?
Well, I've got, it was on my list of books to get. Obviously, having been through the family court system myself, this is something I care about. And I would like to see less destruction of families. I don't know what that exactly would look like. Obviously, being an anarchist, we'd rather see polycentric legal system with competing courts, but in the meantime, between time, what could be done to move the needle closer, and what are some of the real stories about what's going on? And obviously, if it says exposing the cartel of family law, I'm going to be interested. So that's what kind of drew my attention to it. And I saw him on Timcast actually talking about it. And that's kind of what made me think about it. I don't know, his whole story. We're getting into it now, but in the Timcast episode, him and Larry Sharp are some of the only two that I can recall doing. And Larry Elder actually did a really good job talking about the importance of fathers and just how destructive family courts can be. So anytime something like that's mentioned, I'm pretty much locked in.
There's that other guy. He had the long beard that was multiple colors, and he was sharing his wife with some people. He was big into fathers, wasn't he?
He might have been a judge or a lawyer in the family court system.
Right. So I full disclosure, I'm a family law attorney here in California. So this is right up my alley, and I'm very interested to see this because and you and I have talked about this. And so there's this. I don't know if you ever watched the documentary called Divorce Corp. It's all centered around the courthouse that I'm in all the time in Sacramento. One of the judges that they really take issue with, I've been in front of him a ton. He's now retired, but he was bad on some times. He was good on some times. So I see things like this and I'm like, okay. And then I take clients in. And so they tell me a sob story or whatever it is. And you're like, that's horrible. Let me see all the filings. And I go through them and I'm like, okay, for the most part, maybe not quite. Although I talked to a former client yesterday that really got railroaded, and it pertains to kind of this stuff here. So I think he's taking on a great idea, and then he's lionized by a bunch of people. So we're going to go through the book and see if this lionization is useful and if it's helpful and if it's warranted. but also he's the kind of the anti-Amber Heard segment right now as well. So there's people are hitting him from all angles. And I think you and I can maybe take this from a different perspective of, we don't have to agree with everything he says. We don't have to hate him for everything, because there's a lot of good things in there. But I'm always skeptical of people that maybe show us something we want to hear, and then we ignore all the crap that gets us to the point we want. And then it makes us, it ruins our prospects. And then I'll let you rant here a little bit. But my biggest problem is I don't want him making the men victims in the court unnecessarily. There's definitely things they can do. There's definitely things that they can improve upon. But if you just say it's the court's fault, you are never, ever going to get yourself ahead unless you abolish the court or move to a different country or state. So that to me is my biggest concern on this. What do you have to say about so far?
No, I totally agree with what you're saying. Obviously, the courts have a monopoly, and you have to play by the rules. So let's, men need to do a better job, of playing by those rules. I know it's a lot harder in family court. To me, it seems like, to call balls and strikes than it would be in like a criminal court, where you kind of have the facts laid out and the evidence. Especially, your kids when dealing with your kids and your family, it can take a psychological hold on someone, and it can be rough waters to tread through. So
very much so. I mean, there's cases I get where it's only money involved, no kids, and that's just an accounting problem. How do we get through it correctly and worry that when it's kids, you don't give them the cost analysis of, okay, if we go to trial, it's this much, and is it worth it to argue? No, it's your child, and you may have those other issues. Okay, so with that in mind, the respondent, I think. Well, first of all, there's a introduction by Johnny Depp. And by the way, Johnny Depp, I watched that entire trial with he and Amber Heard. And I thought that one, what was great about that is you got to see both sides make all their accusations. And then and this is a one-sided story, which is perfectly fine. But that one was, you got to see both sides of the story. And it was easy for me to then come out in favor of Johnny. So he does the intro. And then we have the foreword by Alec Baldwin. So, do you think let's go to Alec Baldwin. What?
Do you think this Greg Ellis guy who wrote this book helped Johnny Depp with this case at all?
He might have. Book
came out.
I actually, more I read about it, I hope not. Okay, so let's see what Alec Baldwin has to say.
Yeah,
this is to his daughter. She's like 12 at the time. Can you hear it?
Barely.
Can you hear it?
Barely.
Okay, well, basically he calls his daughter a pig, and it's quite. Go check that out. I was coming through loud for me. I'm disappointed on that. So that's just the kind of person you have right in the introduction. What do you say about Alec? Shoot your man in the foot, Baldwin, or face.
He's about to be on trial again, and this time not in family court. He's going to be in criminal court, right?
Right. So I wanted to play that where he sends this text message to his daughter, and rude little pig, as Meredith says here. It's pretty outrageous. Now his daughter's older. She's like some hottie now, and she came out with some video bawling her head off about and how she had abortions, and it was such a great thing for her. It was a really disgusting video, and all the women are like, "Oh, this is amazing! You're so brave." That's the kind of daughter he raised. So there you go. I just thought I'd put that out there. Okay.
Yeah, well, to me, that was his best performance. So I think he should have won an Oscar for that voice, man.
Right. So here we go. The Respondent. We've read it. I would like to actually just read. Now, we're not going to read the book. We're not going to do a Jose Toad style thing here. But I thought it would be helpful to read the prelude in its full. Did you want to read that? Do you want to, or do you want me to do it?
I mean, either one. Okay. I don't mind if you want to swap paragraphs or whatever, or you just want to keep it consistent.
Swap paragraphs. That's the little game. Tell you what, I'll read page 1, XV1.
All right.
I'll read the first one here. Fate is fickle. A simple 3-word cliche that describes the fragility of our lives and the speed with which everything we think is real can become an illusion. Before March 5, 2015, this simple truth was a little more than a philosophical abstraction for me. I appreciated its implications, but I'd never experienced it, never endured a dramatic and unforeseen shift in fortune that I could not navigate until that fateful day 6 years ago. Okay. He's a little flowery with his words, bores me to death at times. So I do skip around when I read. I'm looking for facts a lot. So
yeah, it's
just giving an idea. But I think
a lot
this
of
is
rosy
important.
language.
Yeah,
it's easy, makes for an easy read though.
It does, because I'm like, not this job, not that. Nope, keep going. Okay. One moment I was a successful actor and producer living in an expansive Hollywood home with my wife of 20 years and 2 young sons I adored. But everything changed with a knock on the door by police, the first engagement in a battle with America's unscrupulous and unstoppable family law cartel that has raged on for years and left me with scars, my family in ashes, and my boys without a father. This book emerged from this devastating experience, part memoir, part meditation, part manifesto. The Respondent is the story of my fall from grace, including the many ways I was the author of my own demise and my consequence descent, into despair and confusion, and I was ushered through the gauntlet of the suffocating family law system. Okay, that's the first part. Yeah, go ahead if you want to keep going.
But it's also the story of a slow emergence and rising, an awakening both intellectually and emotionally, and ultimately a catharsis. James Hollis, in opening the Eden Project in search of the magical other, describes this journey from tragedy to self-awareness like this. In Greek tragedy, one feels the earth shudder when a protagonist claims complete self-knowledge. At that moment, one may be certain that the gods begin their work to stun the person back to the proper humility of Socratic questioning.
Jesus.
The spirit in those words lit me a fire of curiosity that has brought me to uncomfortable truths, not only about myself, as I exorcise many of the demons that have clipped at my heels for decades, but about society at large. I believe America is in the grips of an epidemic that rages in plain sight and yet remains invisible to so many. The shocking reality is that 4,000 children are being ripped from their parents in American courtrooms every day. 1 in 3 children doesn't live with their biological father in the home, and 40% of those children haven't seen their fathers in more than a year. The fabric of society fraying as an unfeeling $60 billion a year family law system perpetuates the tragedy.
Did you look up any of those stats to see if they were right?
I haven't yet, but I've got the boy crisis, and I'm pretty sure that has a lot of the citations and more technical statistics in there. Fathers have a reputation for stoicism that bellies a more complex reality in which we feel the pain of family separation every bit as deeply as mothers. A reality made clear by a grim statistic I restate more than once in the Respondent. Fathers who have become ensnared in the divorce system kill themselves 8 times more than mothers. Pause and let that sink in for a moment. For every child who loses their mother to suicide during or after divorce, 8 children lose their father. This is nothing short of a national health emergency demanding an honest accounting of the conditions driving such despair. He's incorrect about the 8 times more statistic.
I looked up the study because it was in another thing, and it's not fathers, it's people that husbands and wives that file for divorce. Okay, so it has nothing actually to. It might actually be worse. But let's take, for example, you file for divorce, you have no kids. He's including those in this statistic. So we don't know if you're a father. But it doesn't include those that just file for custody. So there's people that aren't married that get a paternity, you went through that as well. You go through the courthouse. I mean, if you kill yourself, you're not included in the stats. So it's a little wrong. And I don't know if that's correlation, causation, whatnot, but it's not, the stats are not actually what he said they were. So anyway.
Okay, gotcha.
Which makes me wonder about the other ones we just talked about, which could be right. 60 billion a year. I'm trying to get me some of that in the cartel business.
Get you a piece of pie.
Yeah.
The Respondent is not intended as a vehicle for vindictiveness, but I believe we are all willing participants in a shameful social kabuki dance, mindlessly fortifying the most destructive narrative of our era, that women merely by virtue of being women are the fairer sex. And I'll let you take the next one. But I just wanted to say,
he said kabuki, but
Bukkake.
Bukkake
That's
is
what
the
you
other
were
one.
hoping for.
Yeah, I was like, let's shape this book up. I realize this is a provocation to many in our current social climate, but before jumping to judgment, I hope you'll come with me as I visit not only the darker side of my story, but also the shadow of our collective psyche in an attempt to answer this question, being, what is driving us to devalue fathers and family and perpetuate such a draconian divorce system? When I walked into a jury courtroom in downtown Los Angeles for the first time in more than half a decade ago, I passed from a world of rights and justice to a star chamber of withering and reflexive judgment where due process is extinct and the presumption of innocence is an illusion. In crossing the legal Rubicon from citizen to prejudged villain, I no longer occupied the skin of a complicated human being. Greg Ellis was dead, and in his place stood a nameless respondent, present only to receive the slings and arrows of a society determined to exact its pound of flesh in retribution for male sin writ large. I'm sorry, I can't help but try to do a menacing voice. This is so exaggerated. The respondent is my humble submission to the struggling dialogue, my hope that you find it to be many things at once, a white-knuckled ride through a dirty swamp, an intimate inquiry into love and separation, an exploration of my failings as a modern man and my trauma as a boy, and a helpful, if complete, map pointing to a more humane and collaborative future, not only for forsaken fathers searching for redemption and justice, but for the whole village of people. There you go. That's the part you like. Village of people who love them, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandmas, grandpas. If we are to fashion a better world for children, there is no more urgent project than rebuilding divorce court, revitalizing the image of family, recasting fatherhood as a foundational and heroic role of a lifetime. We have all been the respondent, the person summoned to respond to the allegations of a petitioner or the provocations of our times. The book is my legacy petition. I am the respondent, and this is my story. Okay, and by the way, this is it's a bit much for us to read that, and we're not going to do this, like I said, but it gives you a feel of the story. It gives you a feel that he's definitely a Hollywood writer, and he does a good job of that, and he tells a story mixed in with some. Okay, just a real quick on the facts stuff. I don't want to bog things down and hyperventilate on details, but what's interesting is, if you read a Scott Horton book as an example, if he were to cite, 4,000 children, he'd have a little one there, and there'd be a footnote down below where he gets it. There'd be this, and later on, he finally starts to do that in some of his references. But there's a lot of them that I was hoping that he would include, so I can double check those kind of things. Those are, let's say they're even half right. I mean, that's a grave issue of men are committed suicide. I've only had female clients die on me. Okay.
Well, yeah, I think this is why I care about this stuff, is because it is a huge issue. You look at the crime statistics of kids that grow up without fathers, and you look at all the other statistics revolving around single parent homes and how those kids turn out. They're far less likely to be successful. Obviously, there are exceptions to the rule, but the more that families stay together, the better.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Let's go through Meredith, who's a family law attorney here in Northern California as well. She says, am I crazy, or do you find this bias against fathers not to be the case in California, Tyler? Because I really haven't seen it. That's been part of the problem. And when I went on with Josh Smith, I talked about it, and you and I have talked about this, and then I wrote some Substack things, and it's kind of my point here today, and what I want to go through with this guy to help people, which is men don't prepare for court the way women do. They're in their lives. They're just not anticipating litigation. They go to work, they take care of things. Maybe when they're married, the typical thing that I see is mom takes care of the schedule, dad goes to work, and mom's always getting into things. Now he's a single dad, and he is tasked with doing all these things. Is he doing them? Maybe he's just not used to it, or he's not preparing for that. And so you go to court, mom's got a string of emails and text of what, and there you go. It sets against them already. I have clients, 2 guys that have full custody of their kids, and they have for years, because very successful moms that are bipolar and crazy, and the psych evals prove that, and they just can't get past that. And so it happens. So on the other side, California may be different. So I want to emphasize that. Sorry.
Yeah, I was reading some statistics about fathers that tend to be older make more money are more likely to win custody. Fathers in their 40s have a lot better chance of winning custody.
I will say this: my experience too is, and it does help. You're much better to, let's say your kids are 7, 8 years old, and now you're getting divorced, and you've been the dad in the house like from day one. Your odds, at least in California, are much higher of being able to retain 50% custody because it's like a no-brainer. But you do have these problems where your mom gets pregnant, you get separated, maybe you're not even married. This is typical. Now she has a baby. Now you want 50% of a newborn. It's just not gonna happen, and they're gonna allow mom to nurture this child and have the most. And then it's dad's got to keep on it. Anyway, that's where we're at. But what else do we got? Okay, so you ready for chapter 1?
Part 1, yeah, fear.
Okay, so he does break this up into 3 prongs, right?
Yes.
Okay, so he calls the first one, part 1, fear, chapter 1, the nocturnal terrorist. That's okay. So I don't know how to best go through this. I think we're gonna walk through and we're gonna do it. This is a spoiler alert for the book. That you're fine with that, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm reading it, so.
No, but I
mean,
for
watching.
Whoever's
watching, if you don't want a spoiler alert.
So it starts out where he talks about, and maybe I'll just read a few little things here. This caught my eye. So this is the day that all shit went down. I think it was like March 5th of 2015. What a difference a day makes. I wouldn't blame me for not believing in it. A mere 24 hours before my unwitting experience as a human toilet, I was pitching a project to Hollywood studio head, meeting with Joe Pesci and Andy Garcia, chatting it up with Sharon Stone, and playing golf with Adam Levine, all before strumming my 2 sons to sleep with a ukulele, toadstyle here, in my beautiful Los Angeles mansion. Okay, so he's got a lot of connections with Hollywood. Yeah.
He's jacking himself off a little bit throughout this.
So the premise is he's at home. His wife is actually out of the state. She's on business. Okay. And then his nanny's there. It's March 5th. And then the police show up. He tells the nanny before the police show up, hey, go home, go take care of yourself.
I got this kind of situation. Yeah. Take the rest of the day off. I'm here with the kids. He's got 2 boys. Yeah. And then the police show up and start accusing him basically of child abuse or threatening to harm the kids.
Right. So he says they make an accusation, right? And the accusation is it's called to CPS, which Child Protective Services. Well, he calls them, and I think it's kind of mixed in here, DFCS, Child and Family Services and Protection or something. So the LAPD comes over and they say, hey, we had a credible threat it's confidential though. We can't tell you who it is. And he was baffled. This is one of those streams where you've got to start thinking here. Who could possibly have called the police and report that I've threatened my boys? Okay. No clue. He gives no clue. And matter of fact, later on, he talks a little bit. He has a text message with his wife and it's nonplussed. It's really nothing happening. So he doesn't really get us into the mindset, which makes me always Department of Child and Family Services. Thank you, Meredith. Okay. They're baffled. As the police began circling, his friend, Patrick Fabian, arrived. So he never says why his friend arrived, but the police are there and he says, hey, the kids are safe. Don't come in. Don't worry about it. Patrick comes in and Patrick tells the police that everything's fine. No need to worry. And I'm yelling at the guy in the book, call a lawyer. Why? There's police circling outside your house. Call an attorney.
If CPS shows up, Tyler, what's the best thing to do? Answer the door, not answer the door?
Well, answer the door. They usually have to have a reason to go in. And by the way, that's always a tricky situation. What do you do? Because are you then going to be looked at worse for not answering their questions, for not having an attorney? A lot of times it's like, hey, I don't want to do this without my attorney present. Perfectly fine. They shouldn't be having a problem. I send everyone specifically to a person that does CPS stuff. So I don't deal with that. But otherwise we'll set up interviews and have the CPS come and check out the house. It depends on who the client is. If I could tell they're a little unruly, I'm definitely going to try to protect them more than some of the other ones. So,
so are you At this point in the story, just early on, are you taking it at face value, or are you skeptical a little bit already?
Well, look, he's writing a book, right? And then chapter 2, as an example, he starts out with this, he talks about it. Then chapter 2, the first thing he says is 18 hours before. So I'm like, okay, maybe he's eventually going to tell us there's got to be a reason why CPS just shows up at your house, or DFCS, or the LAPD. There's got to be a reason. He's baffled. It's just an erroneous, he's basically getting swatted is what he's saying here. So I'm skeptical, but I want to find out.
Hypothetically, could this situation happen? Like if you were to take it at face value, like if someone just called and said, hey, I think this person is hurting their kids.
Oh yeah. So
could be a neighbor or just somebody random.
Yes. Somebody hates you. Now, my experience with that, Andy, in California specifically, is the police are not going to stick around if it's just someone that wouldn't give their name, which you can be. It's confidential. It's you can use anonymity, but just says, "Oh, he's out beating his kids, or he's threatened them." Okay, they're gonna go over to the house. They're gonna check, and then they're gonna leave because there's nothing concrete. So to me, immediately, I'm like, "There's something. Why are they still hanging around? There's got to be. There's more." So I'm like, "Okay, well, maybe chapter 2 he's gonna explain it a little better." So anyway, he was handcuffed. Right. Well, so his friend comes in. Now, do you want to talk about it, or do you want me to keep?
Go ahead.
Okay, so just to lay this out, people, we've got his friend Patrick comes over. Patrick goes up and sees the kids. The dad's like, "Don't worry, I don't know what the police are doing out there. They're in the backyard. They're in this." And I'm like, "Oh, geez, if police are walking around like that, you should be doing something." His friend Patrick comes over, talks to the kids, tells the police, "Hey, no problem. The kids are not harmed," and our guy Greg is just continuing to make a meal. Then the people from Department of whatever it is, DCFS, Department of Child and Family Services, come over and they want to talk to him. So he lets him in to evaluate him. Problem number 1: have an attorney, get a warrant. Just don't necessarily do this unless they're I don't know. So I don't know what there's some weirdness going on with that as well. At any point, did you think he should have called an attorney?
Yeah, right away. Right. If the police show up to my house, you better have a warrant. That's all I'm gonna say.
Yeah. Okay. So the police end up arresting him, put him in their car. They treat him like do you remember the story of a few years ago of the guy in Baltimore? They just threw in the back of a paddy wagon and then drove around recklessly until he died.
Was that Freddie Gray?
Maybe. Yeah. So they do that treatment to him here. What'd you think of he doesn't like the police. So far I'm with him.
Yeah, I'm with him on not liking the police. He was a little bit too friendly with them to begin with. He kind of goes through this, obviously a lot of flowery language. I wish he would just kind of keep it cut and dry right. At some points, but it's interesting.
Here, let me read the part about the police. Without wearing a seatbelt, they drove me at breakneck speed, siren blaring, waving through the Thursday night rush hour traffic on Highway 101, in and out and off on the hard shoulder. I love that. The wild maneuvering buffeted me around so relentlessly I had eventually slid off the back seat and onto the floor, wedged between the seat and the floor of the footwell. I was in agony, both physically and psychologically. I let a guttural cry. The glass partition slid open. So that to me, I'm like, yeah, that sounds believable. Treated him like a piece of shit, and he didn't like that. And then they took him to UCLA Medical Center and then over to a different place, and they put him on a 5150 hold. So that's your crazy. Now look, this is where I started to have a hard time. Okay. They said they put him on a 5150, which is a mandatory 72-hour hold, by the way. Threatened his children. The DCFS officer casually remarked, in a rakish man who pushed the clipboard up into my midriff and ordered me to sign. So they for some reason, they're going to put him on a hold. Now, he was on with Dr. Drew, and I guess I haven't watched it, but I guess Dr. Drew kind of went over this with him. And I looked up the 5150 hold. There's definite requirements for that. You don't just get to say, my neighbor's crazy, the police are going to come over there and do something. There actually has to be articulable cause for this. So reasonable suspicion or whatever. So they have to outline this. As you can imagine, it's pretty detailed. So he's in there. He said, I had no idea where that. Okay. Oh, Del Amaro Psych Hospital. I had no idea where that was or why I was there. I had lost my orientation in the world, forgotten my place. I felt extinguished. So he's admitting he's got a little mental skewed ideas.
Yeah, there's at one point where he talks about once they let him out of the ambulance, he like falls and hits his head or something. And I was like, okay, well maybe he is drugged up or something. Like this isn't. Yeah. Maybe people are different. What takes a certain toll on people could be different on others.
Right.
But
he also states, my senses were raw and heightened, but my mind was dull and confused in an unfamiliar way. This is all him in there. Why would someone make up a story about me? I attempted to reconcile the impossible. So he ends up staying in there. Why don't you read the last part of that page 12 there?
Cutting the umbilical cords, embracing them, sharing the love and unbridled joy with family and friends. I'm sick of this shit. I'm going to harm the children. Those 10 words kept ringing in my ears. Their author had used them like a weapon and condemned me in the process. I wondered where he or she was on this same night, probably sleeping comfortably in their own bed. Harm my children? Is there a greater assault on a man's integrity? I finally, gratefully, fell into slumber. It wasn't long after that I woke to that rain of piss and fresh horrors beyond.
So you want to explain the pee, the golden shower at the place?
Well, in the first page of chapter 1, he talks about, he's got, to me it seems like a weird pee fetish, but he says, my senses now tripped into awareness. I peer up and shock turns to disgust as it dawns on me that the rain is cascading from a penis protruding from a tangled forest of pubic hair. A naked man is pissing on my face. And I guess in the psych ward, he was awoken by someone taking a piss on him.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Dickie's in the chat. Hey, y'all. Yeah, there we go.
What's up, Dickie?
I'm sure he's had that happen before. So then chapter 2 starts. Okay, anything wild about chapter 1? One, it's infuriating. Look, it's not beyond belief for what I do where a mom or someone makes up a story and, gets you thrown into jail. Okay, or
if I take it at face value with, believing what he's saying here, it's pretty insane to think that could happen.
Right. And we've all seen stories where police do, take you in for whatever reason. CPS, and you want to talk about that at all? We have time, of course. The CPS, I think it was 2016, where they were having the hearing before the Ninth Circuit. Did you listen to that whole thing that the Mises Caucus posted out?
Yeah, I listened to it. That whole thing just seemed insane to me, how it even got to the Ninth Circuit. DCS basically arguing that they have a right to lie and submit false evidence to the court if it's in what they presume to be the child's best interest in order to take the kids away from their biological parents. We're not even talking about foster parents or some type of guardianship.
Yeah.
So just the things that CPS will go out of their way to do to hurt families.
Yeah. And I tell clients all the time, I'm like, look, CPS can save you. They can save a family or they can ruin a family. And I don't even know if it's anywhere in between. That's just kind of where it is. Yeah. So that what was interesting about that one is, so CPS social workers totally lied, made up stuff. They got caught, but they ended up taking the child away from the parents. They ended up getting a civil lawsuit in the state of California. They lost 2 of them. I think they said one was like $50,000, another 50. Anyways, some decent amount of money that they lost on those ones. But then the CPS social workers themselves filed and appealed through federal court because they said their civil rights were upended or whatever, and that they had qualified immunity. They were getting absolute immunity as employees. The judges were not having any of it. I mean, that's got to be somewhat encouraging, right? We're talking about this, how judges just don't take anything. They just let DCSS or CPS run over everybody, the police. Was it encouraging at all to see that the judges were just like, you're full of shit. I can't believe this is even happening. And you're wasting our time. They literally were saying at that point.
It was encouraging to some degree, but also like in the things that I've read about family courts, and I know this was a federal court and not necessarily family court, and this was a civil issue, but they tend to be better in blue states, and a lot of people don't acknowledge that you know, the New Hampshires, the quote unquote free states, and places like Florida actually have a lot worse family courts than some of the blue states.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was encouraged to see the judges definitely not give it any weight. They weren't having it. And it was interesting to see, you know, that the argument was sort of predicated on the 4th and 14th Amendment.
Yeah.
For the CPS people trying to take away the kids.
Yeah.
And if you know about the 14th Amendment, you got to go back to Lincoln. Stinking Lincoln.
Kate, who's had some family law issues here, and I think she got custody of her son now, when I remember. Dad's get less custody because women are spiteful bitches that use the system to attack fathers and take their money. Happens every day. I do not disagree. There's definitely some of those issues here. Okay, so that's the CPS thing. We talked about that other case. Yeah, and people should go check out that clip. It is interesting. There is one thing to really understand there. There is what's called a fundamental right, and that is parenting. Okay, to have a parent. So this lady that was arguing for the CPS attorney, she was trying to bring a case law that had to do with a foster parent. Okay. And they're like, no, that foster, that's fine. But you have these fundamental rights, heightened scrutiny. If we're going to remove a child from you, that you have to take into account for parents, biological parents or adopted parents, cucks, as Matovik would call them. But anyway, that's heightened. Anyway, so scrutiny was it was good to see that the judges were at least pushing on that. Okay. Chapter 2, we come in here. He wants to back up a little bit further. And I'm like, okay, good. We're at least going to get some of this info here. So the day before, I woke to the boys, packed their lunches, made them breakfast, dropped them off at school, gave them the hugs. Arriving back at my home office at 8 a.m., I soon greeted Andy Garcia. He loves to name drop, who had walked from his home not far from mine to discuss various projects in which we could collaborate. My assistant brought us coffee, and we breezily passed the time with standard Hollywood talk. During the meeting, Sharon Stone called to discuss another project we were developing. Okay.
Standard Hollywood talk. What is that? Gay sex?
Yeah, I think so. To discuss television shows before heading to Lakeside Golf Club for a quick meeting with Joe Pesci to discuss writing, directing the next movie. There you go. This was an interesting part too. Sleep has been a struggle my whole life. With Dana out of town, that's his wife, I couldn't shut down. Psychological foreshocks were rambling and my ability to control them dwindling rapidly. Fissures cracked wider in my mind, and a world that appeared so right felt so wrong. For days, I had felt I was spiraling into uncharted territory. So he's giving you some breakdown here and some light into the fact that, and he talks about not sleeping for 3 days as well. That could be worse than taking drugs and alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, you'll definitely slip into some kind of hallucinogenic psychosis at that point. He doesn't seem well. If you get to the next page, he talks about this text with his wife, and I just don't. What bothers me so far up to this point is that he is alluding to some of his own problems, but won't really discuss in full any of the stuff that he may have been doing.
And to get there, maybe those are discussed in section 2 and 3.
Part 2 or 3. Yes, this is just part 1.
Right.
But these are just my thoughts going through it. This text message says, him to his wife, it says, "We need to make time to sit down tonight to talk, babe. I feel like we are ships in the night, and it is really important for us to take stock of our lives and where we are at. We must find a way to make life easier for you and for you to feel valued. Let's embrace that tonight, okay?" And she just says, "You got it." So obviously there's something going on here that, it's a Hollywood marriage. They got a mansion in LA, and these people are fucking weird to me. So they live in, it's alien to me. So
right, and so remember, this is the day before the cops show up. The CPS, I'll just call him CPS because I don't know, whatever. Yeah. CPS interviews him. He gets the psych hold, and he writes this. Adam and Chris quickly sent. He was in some meeting. It's probably Adam Levine still, and Chris. I had barely slept in 3 days, and I walked in accompanied by a mine of emotional chaos. Adam and Chris quickly sensed something was wrong. I was somewhat incoherent and overwrought. With every thought, a stream of staccato irrelevance followed as I dominated a spiraling meeting and blew past my half-hour time allotment. I offered almost nothing of value in a confused word salad, but Adam was decent as ever and tried to pull coherence from the chaos to no avail. Okay, that's concerning, right? If you're in a meeting, you have no clue what you're saying, and you just basically way out of there. I don't know. Maybe they call his wife and say some things like, I don't know.
Yeah, what's going on with this guy?
Yeah. He said he was going to do big changes and make more constructive life. He does talk about how his wife has had some panic disorders and some irrationality. So that's basically chapter 2. You got it was the text that she had responded. He's like, if you're married, that's not a good sign. Yeah. If you're in a relationship and you say, hey, really, we got to talk about some things, and you got it, that's passive aggressive or something.
Yeah.
Spud says this guy thinks he's Shakespeare. I don't see so well. Is that Bill Shakespeare over there? Yeah.
All right. So getting into chapter 3, crossing the emotional Rubicon.
Any more on that chapter 2 that you wanted to talk about?
I didn't really have anything. It just seems like there's he alludes to some of their rocky relationship problems, but doesn't really make it clear.
Yeah. So that chapter 2 at least gave a little bit of, tried to go background and like we said, step back a little bit. And then chapter 3 is called Crossing the Emotional Rubicon. What do you got?
Yeah, so I've got one quote out of here. It says, you're seriously telling me I'm stuck here for the weekend because the Appropriations Committee in Sacramento was unduly parsimonious on mental health funding? He was there. He was claiming that he was there on the 72-hour hold because they didn't have a doctor in to see him because the city hadn't allocated funds to see him or to have doctors there on the weekend. So to me, this just seemed like a fair description of what bureaucracy is like when you have the state paying for doctors and obviously they're not showing up on the weekends.
Right. I made a note. I had that one underlined as well. And I kind of made a note about it because the legislature is the ones that are making the laws. Okay. You do have case law that goes forward, but we've got the family code, which is it gets updated every year, and the legislature adds to it or takes away, and they make the intent. So the judges, yes, they have a lot of discretion, but they're enforcing those laws. The police are enforcing the laws as well. So I know he has a lot of disdain for those two. He doesn't so far talk at all about the legislature and the idiots that are voting for a lot of these people that are making these laws. Correct. That are now getting handed down. These people think they're doing a good job of like being a judge. So that to me is also like, what are you doing about that? Are you just railing against a judge, or are you going to change the people and move out of the state? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the legislative process throughout family court, there's all these codes and things, and not a lot of people even know about them. Like, I don't know. I'm not involved in family law, and that's why family law attorneys exist, but I think it would be better if some of those legislative issues brought to the forefront of this battle of family courts, and not just blaming lawyers and judges and shitty moms. Like, obviously they're just enforcing what's on the books, and the mom is, or whoever the dirty parent is going to take advantage of it.
Right. So as me being someone in the cartel, it's oftentimes difficult for me to kind of see past from my own experience. I mean, that's one thing I'm somewhat critical here, is because I have an experience in this every day, but it's also good that's why I enjoy talking with you about this, because you have a little bit different perspective, and I need to be seeing that. And I don't know what the changes are. I don't know what they are, but I think once again, you're always going to have someone enforcing something, right? And so it does tend to bleed its way down. I don't know, but I think starting with maybe that, but then, like I said, you've said the red states are different than the blue states in a way that's weird. I don't know.
Yeah. And, to be honest, I even though the red states are worse from my research on this stuff, I'd prefer it to be a 50 state and state by state issue. I do not want federal family courts whatsoever.
Exactly.
But this, if you're a libertarian, a lobbyist, activist type of person, and you're into this stuff, obviously things on the state level are going to be easier to change than they would be on a federal level. So, I mean, if you're interested in this stuff, it's worth looking into if you want to see some kind of positive outcome. And, you wouldn't have to go as far to get to DC. You could go to your local courthouse.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And okay. So he talks to me, his wife finally comes to visit him. And she says, "Have you taken your medication?" It was Dana's voice, but it was frosty and disconnected. No emotional support or inquiries into my well-being. No update on the boys. No apologies for the big misunderstanding. Because that's what he said, is just a misunderstanding. She's going to come here. She's going to say me. Her question was even more baffling because I hadn't been prescribed any medication, nor even had a conversation about it. So there you go. Which makes me wonder, I mean, which part of that is him just saying that, which is, anyway, it's.
Yeah, there's two sides to this story. I mean, I'm inclined to believe him because I don't just believe all women. But, no. I know that this system can be dirty and people will, like I said, take advantage of it. But, these are pretty outrageous claims, so I'd like to see more on it.
I think that was a phone call he had with her, and he's finally like, the person who I thought was my umbilical cord to the life I had been hijacked from was not a lifeline at all. So there's starting to be some realization. This isn't the right person. Maybe she doesn't have my best interest at heart. And it's probably, I don't know. Because then he goes on.
Alarm bell should be going off in his head right now.
Thank you. Yeah. He does then talk about his lack of sleep, and he's got a problem with it for a long time. Sleep has eluded me my entire life. I think of sleep as an emotional church. I've longed for its salvation. So he's got a sleep issue, which could be some sort of a mental problem as well, I guess. He then talked about this shock blanket and having a urination problem.
When he was a kid, yeah. He talks about a little bit about his childhood trauma between his mother and father, and his mom taking him in the middle of the night and him pissing the bed constantly, and they got some kind of shock blanket or something. If you peed on it, it would shock you and wake you up.
Right. And that may sound horrible when you first read it, except for we did that with one of our kids. But it wasn't a shock blanket. This kid, has a urinating problem when he's younger, and you're like, okay, it's whatever. It's, kids go through this. Nothing solving it. Now he doesn't want to do sleepovers at his friend's house. It's becoming more and more of a problem. At some point, I'm like, okay, now I feel bad because it's not him. I mean, no problems during the day. It's only when he sleeps. And he would crash into these sleep modes where he would go so deep. When he'd wake up, the kids would film him and laugh because they said he had like googly eyes. He was all crazy. We found this place, and they had a device similar to this that hooks up to your underwear, and it would go off in the middle of the night as soon as it detected moisture. And it was like having a baby. And you had to go in there. You had to say a code word to him, wake him up, and then make him go to the bathroom. And in the morning, he would need to tell you what that word was. So what was happening is he would sleep and then drop immediately past REM sleep into like super hard sleep. And it was causing problems. And so you're retraining his brain to make these steps down, and it solved the problem. It was miraculous. It was great. I think that's what this exactly was supposed to do. It sounded a little bit more harsh for him. Maybe it was a shock. This was not a shock. It was just a loud noise. It was bewildering.
So what did you do to traumatize your kid into pissing himself at night?
Well, this is why I'm cucked. This was my, at the time, step kid. He's my kid now, but yeah, I don't know what his dad did. Okay. Enough of that. Any more? So he's in this place. I don't know how we keep going through here. He's trying to get out of his psych hold. And at some point he's finally able to work his way out and to get it. And now I keep putting notes in here in the book about time to call an attorney, because he's not calling anybody. He talks about flesh eating lawyers. I did like that. He's not wrong. His mom and his wife and her mother, and then this friend Patrick all came to visit him. He said it was weird. They were a bit cold. They kicked him out. He said he makes his wife's mother sound like an evil person.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in my experience through the family court stuff and with my baby mama, RIP, she wasn't living with her mom. She was living with an older woman figure who was a terrible influence, who sounds a lot like the mother-in-law in this situation, who's just basically encouraging her to hit the detonate button on her family and not try to work things out.
Right.
Yeah. And I never had near the problems it sounds like this Holly weirdo has, if even any at all. It was just people that watch Dr. Phil all day, every day, like that type of personality.
Right. So then he gets here about the wife and the mom. She had driven 1.5 hours to visit me, her son-in-law, to deliver that message. The letter from a flesh-eating lawyer, which I would soon receive, embodied more humanity than Emily's proclamation. I realized I had no one to rely on but myself if I was going to escape. Yeah, so you're need to call an attorney. He finally gets out, or was that the next thing? Oh, she brought him some things, and on that it had his agent's name and phone number. And so now you start to do all the noticing and questions that you have, the JQs, right? So that's Andy's question about what.
Well, she at one point she asked him to sign over all his financial information.
Yeah.
And how alarm bells are not going off in his head. He signs over, all his bank account information and everything to her. And at this point, he should know that, and I think he knows that she's the one who put him in there. And now this is going to become like a more combative situation. He's just fueling his own demise in a lot of ways. And I don't think he understands really what he's doing.
Right. So part of this to go through here is for us to instruct and to try to give people an idea of how they can avoid these problems themselves. We're going to get into a little bit later here where he digs himself some holes that are just insurmountable. And it's crazy. And you've got to, I know you don't like the court system, but you got to play within it if that's what's, your ultimate goal is to have your kids.
Speaking of which, I've got to go pick up mine. I thought my brother was going to be able to pick her up from school so I could do this, but I got to go pick her up. If you want to keep going and I can come back.
I could keep going unless you wanted me to we could do this almost an hour in. Time was it here? How long are you going to be?
Well, I have to sit in the line, so maybe 15, 20 minutes.
We're good. We'll do another session. I got my trial for next week got resolved, so we'll have maybe some more time. So, people I'm not going to spoil everything for you here, but I found court documents so we can at least get the other side of the story. Okay. And we're going to do that. So we'll start here, chapter 4 next time, with Andy and I. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you have a good Friday. Oh, I got to go. That's what you said on the thing. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, right. I mean, if you want to cut it here and then, in a few hours or something, if you want to come back and do the rest of part 1, I'm more than happy to do that too. I want to do it, while it's still all fresh on my mind.
Yeah, let's do that. So maybe we'll rejoin everyone back here in a little bit. I'll go do some exercising. People come back and join us. What are you going to say? 2 hours or so?
Sorry to break it up like this.
No, this is
whatever
what
works
happens.
for you.
Okay. All right, everybody.
I'm fine
come
with
back
like
and
an
join
hour,
us.
hour and a half, something like that.
You get out. I'll talk to the peoples, and then we'll make it.
All right.
No, just kidding. Bye.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
And now.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. And I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast. I can't find it anywhere. They don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke. Yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me, I'll...
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than a 49-year-old wigger. I just started live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But anyways,
boomer.